feel like a piece of elastic that has been stretched and now has no more stretch and cannot spring back. That was written by Nella Last in 1945 in her diaries, but I think it perfectly describes what so many women experience as they hit their 40s, that feeling of being overstretched. In today's episode of the Raising Mums podcast, I want to talk to you about something that I rarely hear discussed in our community. How does home education change? How does it look different as you get older? If you're still in your 20s or your early 30s, please don't click away. This is exactly what I wish I had known 10 years ago. It would have changed the decisions I made and how I prepared my family for this shift. This episode is actually inspired by an email I got from Abdullah in the US. Her email was all about perimenopause, and she wanted to know, what is your morning routine like? How do you take care of your health? Please start a podcast or write something to help us navigate the next phases of our lives with grace. So, Abdullah, I guess this episode is dedicated to you. Barakallahu fiki for reaching out. So, what happens when you hit your 40s? Ladies, sometimes I feel like it's better to ask the question, what doesn't happen? What doesn't change? Because honestly, every woman's journey is unique, but as we enter perimenopause, we encounter a quote-unquote wonderful cocktail of symptoms. Exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, brain fog, oh my goodness, the brain fog, weight gain, weird aches and pains, you might get ringing in your ears, mood swings, and my personal favourite, the random hairs that sprout out of your chin. Things that were once second nature suddenly feel like you're climbing a mountain. You walk into a room and you think, why am I here? Your sharpness slips. Your patience, already stretched by homeschooling your kids, now feels thinner than ever. And you're starting to ask yourself, who am I anymore? Now, quick disclaimer, if you are struggling, if you're struggling, please go and see your doctor. You don't need to suffer in silence. Your body, your health is a trust, it's in a manner from Allah. So if you go and seek medical help, you can consider that a form of worship. Don't suffer in silence. Go and get help if you need it. All you ladies out there who are over 40, you know what I'm saying, and you're all nodding your heads in agreement with all of this. But it's not all bad. And there are actually a lot of positives that come with home educating your children when you're a bit older. And I am going to talk about that later in the episode. Now, today I'm not going to be talking about medical advice. We're going to be talking about how this season of your life as a mother will impact your child's education at home, and how you can lead them through this with ihsan, with excellence, even when you feel depleted. So, how does perimenopause impact your homeschool? Well, first of all, it's going to affect the energy that you have and the clarity that you have. You just simply have less fuel in the tank. The mental gymnastics that are required to juggle multiple kids and subjects becomes really, really difficult. Also, if you've been doing this for a while now, if you've been homeschooling for a decade, let's say, like we have, that magic that the first phonics lesson once had is really worn off by now. And a lot of the things that you're doing now with your children have become routine. And most of us are the primary teachers in our homeschool. And if our well runs dry, the school stops, unless we change the system we have in place in our homes. And we're going to talk about that in this episode, what exactly that means. In your 30s, your health was a goal. But in your 40s, your health becomes critical. If you don't prioritize yourself, the whole system collapses. You, mama, are the most important asset in your homeschool. Not your curriculum, not your beautiful library of books. No, you. You are the most important asset. So for me personally, I have these non-negotiables that I have in place. Daily walking, getting outside every day and moving my body, at a minimum just walking for 20 minutes. Another non-negotiable is my sleep. I can no longer pull all-nighters like I used to. I have to get a decent amount of sleep to be a functioning mother the next day. Another non-negotiable for me is kindness. And I think this is probably the most important one. Being kinder to myself. And it's probably the hardest one as well. So, Abdullah, you asked for my morning routine, and honestly, it's quite boring and slow right now. But it is what keeps me sane. And if anybody else would be interested in hearing about a morning routine, let me know and I can do a full episode on that at another time, inshallah. This season of life is an invitation. That's the way I see it. It's an invitation to let go of your ego. You might in the past have been really against outsourcing the teaching of your children, but now you've got to let that go. If you are struggling at home, you can't let your children suffer. Start looking into online courses for them, tutors, co-ops. Maybe there's a friend or a relative that you've been putting up a front with them, always trying to pretend like you have it all together. You wouldn't ever have dreamt in the past of asking them for help. Now is the time, for the sake of your children, that you let that go. Now, not everyone in their 40s is going to need help from outside, but if you are one of those people who does need some help, there's no shame in getting help. In fact, it might be the right thing to do. I also recommend changing up your routine. So look at your energy levels throughout the day. If your energy levels dip after lunch, and usually you'd be better off taking a nap, then try not to schedule anything after lunch. If usually you would be doing an arts and crafts activity or taking the kids out somewhere, maybe push that back later. Make sure you schedule in time for yourself to rest and push back those afternoon activities, maybe even make them evening activities now. I also recommend looking at the way you homeschool. If your current style of home education requires a lot of prep work from you, now might be the time to switch to something that is open and go. Also look into the Charlotte Mason approach. This is what we use. This is what I love to talk about. Charlotte Mason famously said, "There is no education but self-education." I feel like this is so true. She wrote that the job of the teacher or the parent isn't just to give the children endless amounts of facts. Our job as the teacher is to provide resources, what she calls living books, high quality literature for them, and let the child do the work, let the child assimilate for themselves. We are just there to facilitate their learning, but they are the ones that do all the work. And I think in this season of life, that is exactly what we need to be leaning into. And let's be honest, ladies, we need to move away from spoon feeding. Maybe we fell into that trap of thinking that if we weren't teaching every second, i.e., explaining, dissecting, over-analysing every page, then they weren't learning. But that kind of spoon feeding is exhausting for us. And honestly, it's boring for them. It's like chewing their food for them. They never get the satisfaction of the meal. But by stepping back, you're actually providing your children with a better education. When a child has to grapple with a book themselves, when they have to form their own opinions and narrate back to you what they found interesting, they are building intellectual muscles. They are learning how to learn. They're becoming thinkers, not just parrots. And ironically, the less we interfere with their learning process by over-teaching, the more room we leave for them to develop a real, living relationship with that subject. In this season of life, your lack of energy, your need to sit back is actually the very thing that will push them forward towards independence and a deeper, more personal education. If you're interested in learning more about Charlotte Mason education, my online homeschooling course, Launch Your Homeschool, will be opening in the summer for new parents to enroll. Whether you are new to homeschooling or you just want to start over again, that will be opening up later in the summer. So if you're on my email list, I will let you know when enrollment opens. Something that's been really helpful in this season of life is to really intentionally think about bringing joy back into the classroom. If you love cooking, now is the time to teach your children to cook. If you love outdoors and being outside, make the forest your classroom, make the park your classroom every day. When you're enthused, when you're passionate, they catch that energy. And speaking of things that bring joy and that simplify your life, it leads us perfectly into today's sponsor. So don't go anywhere. After this brief ad break, I'm going to tell you all the reasons why homeschooling in your 40s is actually easier than it was in your 20s. I'll be right back. As homeschooling mums, we're always looking for that quote-unquote holy grail, something that is academically rich but requires zero prep from us. For our family, that has been the Future Explorers Club. We use this as our primary geography curriculum, though you don't have to be a homeschooler to love it. Here's the magic. Every month, a letter arrives in the post addressed specifically to your child. If your house is anything like mine, the excitement when they see their name on a real envelope is unmatched. It's always a total surprise which country the letter will be from. One month it might be from Oman, the next it's from the Swiss Alps or from Tasmania. As a Charlotte Mason educator, I really appreciate that these letters aren't dry or fact-heavy. They are living letters, they are sensory, they are story-led, and they're beautifully illustrated. They invite your child to imagine the smells and the traditions and the daily lives of families across the globe. And the best part for me? One envelope gives us an entire month of geography lessons. Between the story and the maps and the traditional recipes that we cook together, there are also craft activities, and all that planning is done for me. It's gentle, it's meaningful, and it gets everyone off their screens and around the kitchen table. It is the definition of open and go education that actually has a soul. If you want to bring that spark of discovery to your letterbox and give yourself a break from lesson planning, I have a special offer for you. You can get £5 off any 3, 6 or 12-month subscription. And it's also a great way to support the Raising Mums podcast while gifting your child a world of wonder. So click the link in my show notes. Just visit ourmuslimhomeschool.com/explorers and use the code RAISINGMUMS5 at checkout to get your £5 off. Trust me, when that letter hits the doormat, you'll be just as excited as they are. Welcome back. So before the break, I promised you that it wasn't all brain fog and chin hairs. There is a second spring that happens in your 40s if you're open to it. And honestly, in many ways, I found that homeschooling in this season is actually easier than it was in my 20s. And here's why. First of all, you have the gift of perspective. When you're a young mum, everything feels like a crisis. If your 7-year-old isn't reading yet, you stay up all night Googling learning delays. If a lesson ends in tears, you feel like a complete failure. But in your 40s, you've seen it all before. You've seen the seasons change. You know that that child who is struggling to read now will be devouring novels by the time they're 12. You've realised now that homeschooling is actually a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you stop sweating all the small stuff because you finally know what the big stuff is. Another wonderful thing about homeschooling in your 40s is you find gratitude in the smallest of things. When I was younger and home educating my kids, I was so busy checking boxes and finishing workbooks that I often missed the magic. Now I find myself just pausing to watch them. I cherish the sound of their laughter in the garden or the way they smile when they've just finally grasped that concept, mashallah. Those tiny everyday moments have become my rizq, my provision every day. I've traded that hustle for presence, and it's so much sweeter. Another wonderful thing about home educating in your 40s is that you just let go of people pleasing. You know, can I just talk about the freedom that you get when you care less what people think? In my 20s, I made far too many decisions about home education based on what I thought the perfect Muslim homeschool should look like. And I was influenced by trends online or other people's opinions. Now, that's just noise, and it's faded. I don't feel the need to justify my choices anymore. If we decide to spend the morning in the park instead of doing maths, I don't feel crushing guilt. I know my children, I know my family, and I trust the path that Allah has put us on. Another great thing about home education when you're 40 plus is that there's a clarity now with regards to what the children are going to learn. I'm no longer impressed by academic rigour just for the sake of academic rigour. I've realised that I would rather my children have strong life skills and healthy bodies and a deep love for their deen rather than a certificate in Latin that they'll never use. And that's not to say anything against learning Latin. And what this might mean for you is less dry academics and more physical activity, or maybe less desk time and more life skills and character building, less doing it because everyone else is doing it, and more intentionality. I guess what I mean is we're focusing now on raising well-rounded human beings and not just a student. And that shift has only come about because I got older and I realised with time what the most precious things really are. So, Abdullah, and all my sisters out there who are navigating this difficult and beautiful season, be kind to yourself. Lean into the change. Your homeschool might look different now. It might be slower, quieter, maybe it's a little bit more open and go, but it can also be deeper and more full of barakah than ever before. Thank you for joining me today on the Raising Mums podcast. Thank you so much to the Future Explorers Club for sponsoring today's episode. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a sister who might need to hear this today. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.